I have a feeling between the three of us, we could probably go on and on.
Oh,
so
sure.
we
problem.
Yeah, we can do that after.
You should see me editing our things. I'm like, I gotta
We
keep
can
it
do
straight
that
now,
after.
'cause, so many things. I think when you're in your 50s, you say something and then it leads to something else, and then it leads to something else, and it leads to something else.
Yes. I want you obviously both to introduce yourselves so
Okay.
people know
All right.
your name.
All right, ladies first.
So I'm Sheri Green,
And I'm Derrick Green, and we've
Okay.
been together for
34
let's
years,
get it
Wow.
right, and married for
29 years this June.
Okay, so that was my next question. But where did you meet?
We
College.
met at college in Philadelphia.
we
Yeah.
were. It was sort of like on the way to New York. I wanted to go to New York really badly, and I'm from Maryland originally. And my parents, I grew up in the suburbs of Maryland. My parents would not let me go straight to New York, so they said I wanted to go to Parsons, and they said I had to go to a city that was more livable. So I chose Philadelphia because it was on the way to New York. So I was going to art school there to transfer to Parsons.
I was going for a totally different reason. My dad, who is a chiropractor, wanted me to take over his practice, so I started at the University of Delaware, where I grew up, and realized very early on that I had terrible taste in men up to that point, because I was dating just like horrible guys, and I didn't want to dissect cats, and that whole scientific route was not for me. So after getting like a 1.6 my first year of University of Delaware, my dad and mom were like, well, what do you really want to do? And I was like, fashion! So my whole family's from New York, so they were like, you're not going to New York, like, ever. You're saying, like, we moved out of New York, so let's find a school in, like, a livable city. So we found Philadelphia. I went there. I was, really happy with the school. I felt like I was being my true self finally. I was doing things that were of interest to me, and still dating shitty guys.
Yeah, and my sister introduced us. My sister was in her class. I didn't know. We were in a different section. And my sister, I learned very early with my parents that if I made great grades, I could really kind of do what I wanted, as long as I made those grades.
Right.
So I was burning candles both ends. I was making great grades, but I was partying and making great grades and partying. And my sister was the one, she's like, you need a good woman in your life. I'm like, I'm just here as a stop by. I'm leaving to New York. I don't want that at all.
You had the friend with benefits.
She always has to add that.
You had the setup. You were kind of like good to go.
So my sister introduced us because they were doing a benefit fashion show. And they wanted and I was all into fashion, I wanted to go to New York to do that, and they wanted some models for the show, and I wasn't into that part of it. But she was like, you're tall, we need some guys, can you please come and audition? I didn't know my sister really wanted me to meet her, who was helping her, they were doing the show together. So when I auditioned, I walked through.
I was the choreographer of the show.
Yes. So I had to walk in front of her.
All the models we had professional models audition, and we had people from the school audition. Right. So I was positioned at the end of the runway, and the models would come out and audition for me, walk up and walk back. And when Derrick came out, and first of all, I didn't know a black person or an Asian person or a Hispanic person. I knew my school was WASPs. It was the DuPonts. It was,
being Jewish, you were that thing.
It was. I didn't even know a Jewish person. I think there was me and one other person and 2 black people in my whole entire school. So Derrick takes the corner and starts walking towards me, and I'm like, honestly, love at first sight for me.
Aww.
And I looked into his eyes and I said, this is a person that's never going to hurt me. It was just a knowing, and I was in love. 100%. And it was because, I don't know, maybe we were together in a past life or something.
Right.
That's honestly what I feel like it had to have been. But
2 weeks later, we were 2 weeks later?
No, it was because I think we met in September, and then I moved in like November, and by the end of November we were together.
Yeah, I was living in a dorm situation. Well, no, not really. It's like kind of like a mixed frat house. I had met a bunch of friends. We lived in the dorm. We didn't like the dorm, so we rented a brownstone, and it was 8 of us, good friends, girls and guys, who moved in there. We were looking for a roommate, and by that time we were kind of seeing each other, and she moved in, and that cemented it.
That is so awesome.
After I moved in 2 weeks later, we were like
and
a couple, done deal.
deal.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so my next question. I hate to say it, only because I've been there, and I'm curious, especially you as a Jewish girl, because I'll just say the same thing. I grew up in this area. I grew up in Encino, but in the hills. Mainly, my school was mainly Jewish. Never been around black people. I think there were 2 people at our school that were black. The same Asian. I had no clue now, and most of my friends were Jewish. And I went to Hebrew school. I did all that. So for me, I was sheltered like no tomorrow. Anyway, when you guys met and the parents found out, was there conflict? Okay.
Who wants to go first?
I feel like there's definitely more conflict in my family.
There's more conflict. I would say church community and things like that for me, not within. Well, it was 1 person. No, 3 that I can think of. Go ahead. You go first. Yours.
So, yeah. No, I was not raised religiously at all. My dad went to yeshiva, like the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
Like I have relatives in Israel that are rabbis, but my dad got such a bad taste in his mouth from the whole Judaism experience, and he didn't raise us that way. So we were raised, with no religion, no spirituality, and my parents were also on their way to divorce, like since I remember being born, and so there was a whole lot of not feeling like there was anything tethering me, any kind of foundation. And so in my head, and they sent me to like a really hippie school for elementary school, and I went to just like a normal private school for high school. And they never said anything about marrying a Jew or marrying someone who was white or don't do this or don't do that. And when I was completely blown away by Derrick and fell in love at first sight, and I told them about him, it was like an atomic bomb. It was like, my grandparents sat Shiva. My parents stopped talking to me. My mom was constantly crying because, of what
I'm not laughing, but it's the same thing. Go ahead.
As what she was like mourning.
Right.
My dad told us don't hold hands in the neighborhood. I mean, and I was just in utter shock because I didn't think I was raised that way. I thought I was raised to love everybody and that we were all equal.
Well, you were raised to love everybody, but
just don't bring them home.
So
be friends and treat them as equal.
So I can remember one of my visiting my family in Delaware, and then hugging them to say goodbye. I was going to catch Amtrak back to Philly, and they were just like, so just promise, like whatever you're doing, that like you're not going to end up with someone who's out of the race and the religion. Like this isn't going to be a forever thing. And I remember hugging them and patting them on the back, and my face is this way and their face is that way, and I'm just thinking, sure, Mom and Dad, and I'm thinking, fuck, like, whoop, like just shock. And I just couldn't believe that they would pick the religion and these rules that I was even raised with over my heart, my love, and what I thought was best for me for the long haul, And it was just such a feeling of talk about feeling left alone in this world. I really felt like they gave me no tools and no rules. And then when I went against what they had in their head, all of a sudden I was the bad guy.
And the weirdest thing is they liked me.
Right, exactly. Right.
They liked me as a person, but
I had always been with horrible, stupid, crappy guys. He was like the nicest person from the nicest family, treated me like gold, and was just had a smart head on his shoulders, wanted to make babies with me, wanted to like make me happy, and I just couldn't believe that they were doing this. And still to this day, as you can tell, I'm a little resentful still. But but we've gotten to a point where
everybody's a love fest now.
Right. So they're in there. Yeah. I wish I could say that for my family.
No, that's the biggest thing down. It's they love like my children.
Well,
they're just like it's a big love fest, and I get apologies from her mom and relatives all the time. Like I'm so sorry it was like that in the beginning. And it was I understood. And who helped me through it a lot was my dad, not my mom. Because my mom got upset because it's just what you don't realize what you said to Sheri when you asked that question. You said to her, were there any difficulties in the family?
Yes.
And you said, especially from you. because
Yes.
the Jewish, you know how Jewish
Yes,
people react.
right.
My mom had a hard problem with that, which made her have a problem with Sheri in the beginning. She liked Sheri, but that's the question she got all the time. Well, how does her family feel about that?
Right.
And she was like, excuse me, what about how do I feel about
Right.
it? You know, and she also had this thing of like, she liked Sheri, but she wanted to be with a strong black woman. You know, she like, how can this little white woman be you need a strong black woman by your side. And I always say Sheri proved it wrong after having three children natural childbirth.
Right.
You know, but that was a big problem with my mom.
That was just a physical strength. I also
Yeah.
have, you know.
Yes, and she stands up to my mom because my mom is a really not stands up, but she stands her ground, and my mom respects that about her.
Right.
But my mom was now. In the beginning, they hit heads a lot. That was a problem. I also I was raised very religious in a Baptist church. My family was very part of it. They helped build this huge church in Maryland, one of the founding families. So I was supposed to marry somebody in that community. That's just the way it was. You're a strong black man. You come from a good family. Mom and dad are still together. You're supposed to marry black.
Right.
So I had my father's older brother, who introduced my parents, when he found out, he didn't say anything until he found out that Sheri and I were engaged. And we were visiting my mom and dad, and my uncle comes to visit. And I thought he was just coming to visit, but he wanted to talk to me privately. And he sat me down and asked me, why did I want to do this? Like, why would you do this? And his oldest daughter came over and did the same thing. Like, why would you do this? So I think both of us struggled with, like, in the beginning of, like, people.
Well, then he says to me,
Shalom,
Shalom,
that's
Sheri.
what you
That's
people
what
say.
you people say,
Yes.
right? And I'm like,
So-
okay.
Not really?
You know?
I don't.
I love it.
So that, you know, and you know, it's like I would go camping with Sheri's family, especially in the Virginia mountains, and my grandmother would be terrified. She'd be like, you know, why are you going into the woods with those white people? You know, kind of like, you know, 'cause she's grandparents,
Right.
she's deep stuff, she understands this stuff, you know, in the way she understood. But Sheri and I kind of just, we had a good community of friends around us, and people.
Well, besides that, I think at the end of the day, you know, the path we took, you know, we got together in the late 80s, so it was not as cool as it is now.
Yeah.
You know, so we got,
82, 88.
Yeah.
we've been together since 88.
Oh my God, yeah, that's when I met my ex.
And it was really like, it's not for the weak of heart, you know, it's,
Because you have to
you
stay on
gotta
your
be
own feet.
really like,
Strong,
Strong
I agree,
in
I
your
agree, and it's
convictions.
responsibility
Yeah,
too.
there is, and like your son Zach was asking me, you know, a lot of interracial relationships, you look them up, they don't work. And he said, he was asking me, why do you think that? And I said back to him, because you have to understand, a lot of young relationships wouldn't work out without the older people in the family saying, honey, just be patient, dear, just,
Right.
you know, just work out. When you're in an interracial relationship, those same people that you could depend on are not the
Turning
people,
their back.
they turn their back. And they say to you, I told you so.
Right.
So you really have nobody older in your surroundings to go to and maybe complain or say something, because if you do, they're going to push the issue of you shouldn't be with that person anyway.
Right. Well, it's interesting because two things. One, the reason what I said about you with the Jewish thing was because I was disowned too, literally where I went to see my dad when they kicked me out, and I said, I'll always love you. And he said, you made your choice, I made mine. And he slammed the door in my face. And I believe he punished me to the day he died.
Or at least your grandparents.
We had a relationship. I believe he did love Zachary. He came in and out, but it was always he in and then out. And I once said to him, you know, you're racist. And he's like, no, I'm not. And I marched with blah, blah, blah. Because remember, big time were in, you know, he grew up in Toronto. But he just also felt one of the big things is, I'm going to have a difficult life.
Right.
Period. Now, whether I was with Jay or not, Zach's father, we never married, we were engaged. I chose to walk away, and then he chose, then I'll walk away from both of you. So I literally raised Zach on my own, but I think Jay, 16 years later, we had a conversation, and he just said, I realized I could never handle the whole black and white and Jewish thing. And I just was like, wow. And you are right, you have to be a strong person.
You have to be.
My son not only made me, I think, a better person, I grew up. I literally, like, see, my parents told me I could only date Jewish. They never said, he could have been a Jewish Asian, Jewish black, he had to be a Jew. And again, we'll see what happens. You know, we make jokes like Sammy Davis Jr., blah, blah, blah. But I had to grow. I literally had to grow up because my father also cut me off. I grew up spoiled and privileged. I had no idea of the cost of things and literally being on my own. So once my father cut me off in every capacity, he forced my hand. I had to go live with Zach's father. So so there were things, going on there. But that's why I wonder. So I understand completely what your parents did and why, because as liberal as they were, look, my father was a Hollywood director. Hello, he was not at all.
Sheri's grandfather, something like that, but it's true. When we decided to actually get married, he had already, when we were engaged, he set shelter for her. But when he decided we were going to get married, I guess by that time I had met a lot of people in the family, and people were accepting me, and they were all getting on him about being racist. And he wrote me this 3-page letter, which I always tell us. Sheri didn't want me to open it, so she steamed it open so that I could read it, and then she closed it and returned it like it was never read. But I read the whole thing, and the whole thing, basically what he was trying to say, it wasn't my race that he had a problem with. It was the fact that I wasn't Jewish. And all these things that he thought for his Jewish granddaughter that he would be able to do, and his great-grandchildren, all those dreams and all those thoughts were being taken away. So it was very eloquent, but at the end of the day, I still felt, it didn't make me feel any better. I still feel you're judging me for something that I have nothing to do with.
No, what it is at the end of the day, no one should put their limitations and their rules and regulations on another person.
Right.
Because you know what? I have my life experience, but my kids have their own life experience, and so I can't put what worked for me and for me and say you have to live by this. And whoever you love is who you're going to love,
And you have to deal and accept the consequences at whatever level.
Exactly.
And I agree, because that was one thing I said to my father: you're making me choose between my family and loving someone.
Right.
And ironically, with Jay, as much as I know now, I knew eventually if my parents didn't force my hand, it would have probably dwindled anyway.
Yep.
And which is so sad. So, but I should say that because I got the best thing out of it, my son.
Right.
But those are the things that I realized, wow, that's what's so scary. Now, I want to ask you, did your mom or dad or family, because I don't understand, my ex's family was completely accepting of me, unless they behind the closed door. I lived with his mom for a while. So was there a reason why your mom said that she just wanted you with a strong black woman?
I think so. My mom is very fair. Literally, her and Sheri the same skin complexion. So she grew up, her and my dad both grew up in rough neighborhoods. They met and got out. They moved to, worked hard, moved to the suburbs. But all my mom's life, she was teased about wanting to be white, or you think you're white. In a neighborhood, a really rough neighborhood, so she had to fight.
She was tortured.
She was tortured. She had to fight all the time.
Physically assaulted.
Yeah, she had to fight her way out. So I think to her, too, it was a little bit about, people already think you're white, and now your son, who's fair-skinned, now he's dating a white girl. So it was kind of...
Again, it was her comfort zone,
yeah.
her limitations.
And my mom was very prideful. I think she got a lot upset when people kept asking her, how did her family feel about it? So my mom was kind of like I said, she was kind of like, how did her family feel? Why do we? Yeah. But I would say most of my family, they're very accepting. My dad loved Sheri from day one. My grandparents were very lovely to her. They had things to say behind her back, but it was mostly about my safety. It wasn't I don't like her. It was kind of just like, you know what you're taking on, and you're out there with a white woman. People are you might get hurt. So it was more like they were worried.
Well, and look, in the '80s, I'm sure you guys have experienced a lot too. I can tell you stories that happened with my ex and I, and he would just give me looks that I'm not going to get into because of my last episode, where he taught me okay, we're getting stopped by the cops. Keep it quiet, and I did. I wouldn't. Do not say we're together, because that was just their way of really. Humiliating him even more.
We never had problems with the cops. And me being a bigger guy, I never really had problems with guys, white guys, eyeballing me. Right. But what we did have, aggressive black women.
I had that. I mean, where they wouldn't let me in the bathroom.
Yeah, waitresses, women walking by saying horrible things to her. She's like, "Did you see that?" And I'm like, "What?"
Yeah, you had to get me in the bathroom of the movie theater.
Yeah,
I had that happen to me at a club.
Yeah.
I told Jay I need to use the washroom. He was smart enough. I went because it was predominantly black people. I went to use the washroom, 2 girls would not let me out.
Mhm.
He walked in and just gave him a look like,
That's
it just
funny, the
moved.
same thing.
Yeah, and again, this was late
Crazy.
80s.
That's crazy.
And again, this was something I'm like, what did
is
I
going
do?
on?
What did I do? And I've never gotten in a physical altercation with anyone, and I'm thinking, this cannot
We've been
happen.
sitting at a restaurant in Manhattan, in New York, and a black woman could walk by. And look, I understand it, I get it, but
You're taking
it's
our
like,
men.
right?
Not just that, but
Because I don't want to sound like I'm like bagging on black women. That's not true. That's
No,
not what
no,
it
no,
is.
right.
But I'm just saying where, from our relationship, where I saw aggression of women, black women, looking at her like, how dare you? You know.
Yes.
But I have so much. It's with all the race stuff out there and seeing what my own kids go through, because out of my 3 kids, I have Riley who has dreadlocks. He's very light skinned, but he has dreadlocks. Everyone assumes he's black guy, I think.
Yeah. Or biracial.
Kira,
Who just, they don't even- she looks just like me.
she looks like a black girl. She
Yeah.
doesn't
Right.
like she has a white mom.
Right.
And Tori
Tori
is
is a
kind of like a
quintessential-
hybrid.
yeah, she's
a quintessential
biracial.
Yeah.
But seeing what they go through, seeing what black people in general go through, whenever there's some like major thing in the news or major thing that he's really reacting to that just happened in the news or whatever, I have so much like it literally breaks my heart over and over and over again, and I feel bad being white.
You feel guilty.
I feel-
I said, don't feel that.
I feel
He's like, it's not
I
you.
feel just like I can't share this with him. I can be there for him
And listen and
and listen, but who am I to share it with him? Like I don't know.
Well, look, Zach Lassie, most of my closest friends, and it's not on purpose, are black or a few Jewish. And we kind of laugh. That's going to be another episode where I want to talk about why do a lot of blacks and Jews not get along.
We talk about that all the time, and I always say, like, if they understood, if like the cultures both understood the power
yes.
that if they did get together and lock horns with the rest
God
of the
help
world,
everyone else.
God help everyone else.
Yeah.
But it's just such a division of
Yes.
non-trust,
Well, and a part of it too is taking people's stereotypes that are usually perpetuated from other races
Yes.
and throwing it so then they take blame and fault and everything.
When her mom came to our parents in the first visit, we were a couple, they came to visit my parents in Maryland, and her mom after told her that it was the first time she ever been in a black home. And she was surprised how normal it was, And she's like, well, Mom, what did you expect? She's like, I just didn't know on the way here. She's like, I just didn't know. I'd never been inside of a,
But that's our problem. Look, and for me, the pendulum from the way I was raised, and my ex was different. I mean, he came from poor.
Mhm.
His mother, the richest woman I ever knew, and I don't want to get into because I cry because she's not around anymore. And my son never met her. He was 7 months old when she passed.
Mm.
That was one of the reasons why I wrote a screenplay, because I needed to write down everything I experienced living with her, the good, bad, and ugly, because she was my hero.
Mhm.
And that's where slowly I started becoming an advocate, not like I'm going to be on the street with Black Lives Matter. I mean, I have marched, and I could say, yeah, I know, I'm a Jewish woman who loved wholeheartedly a black man, and now have family that's that way, and I'm raising a son of my own who's black. So I was always, he used to laugh, the first one, like, Zach, sometimes when people say, Jen, you have a chip on your shoulder, because I'd see people make looks and comments, even with Zachary, and again, that's the other thing too, I'm sure you got in the late 80s, a lot of black men, if you weren't a big-time celebrity, big-time athlete, came from, upper class, African-American home, if you were just an average black guy, I don't want to say average, but you know what I mean, you most likely, you were with a trailer park trash. Here I am, and people would say, well, who is he? What does he do? Oh, he says this and that, he's college educated, he has a career, but he's not, Muhammad Ali, or, and they're looking like, oh my God,
Right.
why would you do that?
Right. I mean, I understand that even that's one of the black. For instance, my father is a hardworking man. My mom stayed at home. We were upper middle class. We were one of the first people to move in our neighborhood in the suburbs as a black family, which that's a whole nother segment. But everyone always assumed, and then they bought a new house when we had their grandkids. It was a nice big house, and people would ask him when they moved in the neighborhood, "Oh, are you an athlete? Oh, are you a celebrity?" And he's like, "No, I'm just a hardworking man." And they're just like, it was like, because they don't know that. It's either if you're either poor or you're a celebrity or an athlete, and that's how you make your money. There's nothing in between. You know, so I totally get that, what they were thinking. You're dating this black guy, oh, he must be a celebrity. You're like,
Yeah, it has to be
no,
something.
it has to be something, you know. And it's just, and I was talking to about how, I wanted to go back to how my dad was the one who really kept me centered, you know, because, you know, he was definitely there for us in the beginning. And when Sheri's family started trying to give me attitude, like she has an aunt who still apologizes to me about this too. I was at the parents, and we were just dating, and the aunt came over to with her husband and 2 kids for lunch. And the aunt told Sheri's mother, "I'll sit down to lunch with them, but it doesn't mean I agree with what's going on." Sheri was so upset, she was ready to pack our stuff and leave. But my dad was always
angry.
my dad.
Yeah,
My dad was.
boo-hoo, it was angry.
no.
Yeah, like an insult.
Yeah, my dad was the one that always said to me, "Do not change your behavior. They're going from a stereotype. You show them who you are." So I said to Sheri, I was like, "No, I'm not going to leave. I'm going to sit at that table." And then I found out also I had 2 younger brothers who were around the same age as their kids, because my parents, you know, it was 4 of us, and they had later children. And I knew how to deal with kids. I was the oldest. I was like, I'm going to have those kids eating out of my hand, and she's going to fall in love with me. And guess what? She did. You know. So, but my pride. Every time a family member did something like that, if we went to a bar mitzvah or a wedding, my pride wanted to be like, "How dare you?" You know, but
Rise
keep it,
above.
because my dad told me, keep it calm, be the gentleman you are. And to this day, all those people apologize to me, because you know, if I would have, as you say, pop off at them, or just been like, they would have a reason to be like, But no, you behaved badly, and I never did.
Right.
You know, so I mean.
And again, it's back to having thick skin. Because there's again, the same thing. There were so many times raising Zach on my own, the comments, the looks, my family, my dad would come in my life and out, and he did some horrible things. Once, I don't want to get into, but my sister was engaged to a guy, well, she ended up marrying him, and my dad went to dinner with, my dad and his wife went to dinner with her future in-laws to talk about that I'm not a good mother in person. And I found out because I happened to have been friends. That's how my sister, my sister's sister-in-law and I were friends first, and we introduced her brother and my sister. And I just sat there sobbing, what did I do? What did I do? Like, I would sometimes just cry literally to God, what did I do? What did I, like, I have been single now for a long time, because besides being extremely picky, my goal was to raise my son the right way, do the right thing, and all I did was try to work hard and provide.
Right.
I wasn't the party girl or doing drugs and like being an irresponsible parent. So I used to think, what am I doing?
Right.
I just want to raise my
You're just
son and be a mom.
You're just rubbing up against their comfort zone and making
Right.
them, making them feel off balance. So they're going to try to maneuver you back into what feels good for them. It really had, it really wasn't wasn't
it's so
specific to you.
hard,
It was
yes.
just their experience.
And ego. That's what I said to my dad, because at one point he's like, why would you do this to me? And I was like, it's not about you, it's about me. And so these are the things that they take it personally.
Yeah.
Hey, we do. We're life coaches now, and we deal with so many people, especially the older you get. In the decades, the more people are so rigid in their unhappiness and moving away from that, because they have been raised with values and rules and limits that they didn't choose. It was given to them. They were, not like anyone had.
And they accepted it.
Yeah, well, you get to a point where you're living your life and you're like, why am I miserable? Why is nothing working out? Why is each time I date a different guy, it's the same bad situation? Why every time I move jobs, I get into the same bad situation? I'm on my 3rd city. Why am I finding the same bad situation? and wherever you go, there you are. So it comes down to deciding if things are not working and you're not happy, to changing you.
For you.
But see, a lot of people want to change everyone else as they go through life because that's what feels most comfortable to them. Like say you're my kid and I have a different way that's worked for me and I'm happy and I'm comfortable and I want you to do exactly what I've done and don't deviate from that because this is the right way. And I know that because I've experienced that. Well, you have your own experiences. You have your own dreams and wishes and you're your own person. The problem comes in is when someone tries to put their thing on you, and when you don't fit their mold, they're like, you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, maybe your mold is wrong for me.
Right.
It worked for you, you know. And being parents of 3 kids, you got to be like a different
For
mom.
each one
I
of
have to be 3 different mothers.
Yeah.
Right, because they're all different.
Yeah.
So that's going to be my next question. So what are your concerns and lessons for having biracial kids in our society?
Yeah.
Because what we experienced finding love, right, as couples, in especially late 80s, I know it's not as bad now,
Right.
but I still think it's
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, well, let's just go back to another shocking thing that hit me was that Sheri and I going to college, we met in Philadelphia, then she moved up to New York and I continued going to Parsons. So in Manhattan, we had a nice group of friends and we met their parents. And their parents loved us as Sheri and Derrick, that couple. Oh, they're great, they're great. When we actually decided to get married, do you know what those same parents said?
Oh, no.
I like them as a couple, but I hope they don't decide to have children. The children are going to be so confused. I hope they don't. And we were hearing this
As
from
did my dad.
we were hearing this from
Mine too.
our friends who we've gone to the parents' house, met them. They've had us for the weekend, swim in their pool, like you kind of said with your kids. And to hear these parents who you feel like are like kind of second parents to you, their kids telling you, oh, you know, my mom said and my dad said, I was just like, it blew me away. I was shocked more by that than I knew with dating interracial. Like I didn't have my eyes closed to it. I just didn't care, you know. But that shocked me a little more. That these people who I thought, these older people in my life who I thought loved me genuinely and loved us as a couple and was there for us, would say something like that. You know. As for having biracial children, we lived in Manhattan. So living in New York, there were problems here and there, but not as much if we lived in a different area, I would say. I mean, you can talk to them because they went to private schools, you know, and in Manhattan, you have in private schools, like our kids, we could afford to send them, but they were very smart, great, so they had to take these tests, and them being part Jewish and part biracial, of course, they wanted to give them a hefty scholarship to have them there. So, you know, you had the people who had scholarships, and you had the people who parents had to pay a pretty penny for them to go because they, and I think if you would talk to especially my oldest daughter, she would have something more to say about that. But as for being a biracial family growing up in Manhattan, I think it was more of a magnet there. It was more like, wow, than like.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I experienced was like my dad going, well, if you're getting married, don't have kids. All right, now you have 1 kid, don't have another kid. Like, you know, and they just thought it would just be too difficult. Like, why would you want to put your kids through that? And my feeling, like, I'm the kind of person that I'm going to walk my own walk. I'm going to beat my own drum. And if you tell me I can't, I'm going to beat it harder.
Mm-hmm.
After my own heart.
So if you're telling me there's something that feels so right that we're going to create a child out of our love, and then that's wrong because something that you, like, think, like, go over there and pound sand because keep it away from me. I'm not interested. And, you know, I feel like when you raise children, you have to give them a foundation. That foundation can look like many different things. We feel like organized religion really leaves out a lot of people. Leaves out a lot of people, the LGBTQ community, you know, leaves out, you know, his church completely physically turned their back on me. You know, when I came up to the stage when we were like,
we were having my oldest christened in our home church.
Yeah,
My mom really wanted it.
Okay.
So,
She wanted, after that, she never went back because it was just like the whole reaction of the church. Like how she was shocked, like how they would.
right,
basically,
so that being organized religion and what that organized religion saying that, you know, 2 different religions shouldn't be together, that there should be no gay people, that, you know, what my dad experienced with yeshiva and the hardcore stuff that he had.
Extreme, I know.
I said, you know what, what's most important to me, and this is not the only way, it was just for us, it was having a strong belief in God, having strong, family first, like loving your siblings, loving your parents, loving your extended family, being a good person, understanding where you come from,
Yes.
because we were
Christmas,
slaves,
That's what I always said too, like, I was like, I tell my kids all the time, you come from two strong people that are persecuted.
They tried to extinguish the Jews. They tried to, it was from Jews to blacks to Native Americans.
Yes.
So it was just like, we always told them that you come from strong people, you come from a strong love, you come from two strong parents, and, you're going to go figure it out for yourself. And with that, though, it's not like go flap out in the wind. It's like your foundation is a strong belief in God, a strong belief in family, a strong belief in being a good person, doing what is best for you, best for the world, best for whoever, is experiencing your story. And that's it. But I feel like what is really most important is that they feel like they have a strong foundation, that if they fall after trying this, and that, they have a foundation to fall back on, that we all, whoever's having the issue or whatever, that we all rally around them, they're together, we're together, we're going to figure it out together, and a very strong belief in God, that at the end of the day, if you're just by yourself out there in the middle of the ocean, talk to God.
Higher power. I completely agree.
So,
I grew up in a very conservative home. Now, my father, ironically, grew up in was a country boy. Like, they grew up in Canada, North Country. They moved to a small town. I'm not going to get into all the particulars, but they were the only Jewish family, and they dealt with major. When my uncle wrote a book, and I'm reading it in tears, like, he wasn't allowed on his best friend's porch. He could knock on the door. He had to stand on the sidewalk because the father didn't approve that he was a Jew. So there were things, correlation. And my father, I always thought, was, like you said, more liberal and open, but he ended up being conservative because I think he didn't have much of an identity growing up, because my grandfather was, quote, an atheist. Ironically, I think my grandfather was an atheist because a lot of things had happened to Jews, because if you walk in my hallway, you'll see artwork that was my grandfather that was were Jewish symbols as he got older. So I thought it was interesting how it changed, but to know who you are.
Right. And yes, but like my mom will say, because her dad, my grandfather, he was the leader of the bigotry and the racism in the family. Like he hated anyone who wasn't Jewish.
Wow.
And so, but my mom will say, but he got stoned on the way home from school. They would throw stones at him and call him Jew boy. That's what he grew up with. And I'm like, okay.
You should know then.
So then you take it forward and you change it. You don't bring your neuroses and your hatred and your bigotry and your racism forward because this happened to you, and now he would just always say, don't look for, if you're a Jew, don't look for a house unless it's during Christmas time, because you go to the neighborhoods where there are no Christmas lights.
I never heard of that.
It's like all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's just, and that stuff infuriates me, and we really try to raise our kids. You are no better than anyone else. I mean, growing up in New York City, you had the $1 million apartments right next to Section 8 buildings. Like, you had, on the same subway card, kids going to $50,000 a year elementary schools, and the kid going to the public school who lives in the shelter. So New York City was a really great foundation of no one's on a high horse, no one's better than the other person. Everyone has their importance in this world, and
to be different was more there. I feel like, because we still would visit my parents in the suburbs of Maryland and go to the mall and stuff, and Sheri's parents in Delaware and go out, and it was just so like, wow, this is what it is out here.
Right.
So I felt like raising our kids in Manhattan, it kind of was a little bit of a bubble for us.
Right,
because it was multicultural.
So multicultural.
We lived in Toronto. He doesn't remember. We moved out here when he was Two, there's a part of me I wish I stayed in Toronto because the same thing, extremely multicultural. Our last place I was in a brownstone in Greektown, and next door was Jamaica.
Yeah.
All the Jamaicans, and I would take him to get his haircut there, and they would talk to him, you know.
That was on purpose, raising
Yeah.
the kids in New York City.
Yeah.
Send them to, you know, the place where we sent. They spent a lot of time with their grandparents in the summer. And if you talk to our kids, you know, I'm sure they'll have their stories here and there, but they'll say they had a pretty wonderful
Well-rounded,
upbringing.
yeah.
You know, they felt a lot of love, and at the end of the day, they felt, I'm a mother lion, his mother's a mother lion, you know, and my mom is like,
Luckily, the
my
family.
mom's like a fairy princess, grandmother kind of, you know. So look, everyone has their things, and it might not have been smooth in the beginning, but I was never going to let my kids not feel like they didn't come from something super special, and not feel grounded in the family, grounded in a belief in God, grounded in knowing that you go out there and you try to fly, and if you fall, we are there to help you back up and to send you back out.
And you know what I have to say about kids? I think our kids made our situation better when it came to the family. Sheri and I are both the oldest children, so they were the first grandchildren, especially my oldest daughter, Sheri. She's the first grandchild out of 10. And I think when both grandparents saw that new little baby, it was done.
Right.
It was done. And like the family too, the
Yeah.
grandmothers. And even Sheri's grandmother at that point told her grandfather, I'm not doing this anymore. She's like, my granddaughter has just had a grandbaby girl. I'm going to be in that baby's life. And she showed up to when the baby came home, we were all like, whoa. Then a couple of years later, when the kids were, Tori's probably about 8, so they were 8, 6, and 4, Sheri's grandfather, the one that set up, he was like, no, I'm not doing this. He wound up getting diagnosed with lung cancer, terminal. And guess what he did? He came around. He wanted to see them, and he wanted to be a part of their life. By that time, it was too late.
Yeah.
He was this kind of creepy old guy that, you know, wanted to hug and kiss them, and they were like, oh,
Yeah,
no.
exactly, yeah.
You know, and he could see them with the other grandparents, like very loving, because our kids are very loving to their grandparents, but he was that weird old guy over there that, who is he?
Well,
like,
life is
what?
too short
you know,
when you realize
Yeah,
all
but
said
you know
and done.
what? You don't have any
It's like- I
relationship
would say
with
it's
him. You're
lost.
scary looking. You're making my daughter cry. Sorry, but
Well,
I'm picking my kid first. And
yeah,
I'm moving
well-
you to the side.
Okay, one thing I used to tell Zach growing up, I always said, just because someone has a title doesn't entitle them in your life if they don't want you.
Exactly.
Because on and off my dad, I'll tell you, I don't want to cry, my dad's older brother stepped up literally from the moment he was born.
That's beautiful.
So when my father, I don't want to get into it because it's a whole long thing, but my father eventually, when he did decide to call again, and Zach was 4, and we were living over the hill, and my dad called and said, oh, I heard, you know, like you're raising Zach Jewish, and I know. And I said, you know, nothing's changed. I still have a black son. I still had him out of wedlock. I'm still a single mom. What do you want? And he goes, I'd like to see you and Zach. And I said, then this is the deal. As long as you say and don't do anything that's hurtful or derogatory to me or my son, I'm fine. So we drove down the hill, and Zach, of course, in the backseat. Oh, you know, oh, where does my grandfather live? We're not going on a plane. I said, no. Oh, then why haven't I never met him before? And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to say anything. So we get there, and it was actually for, I think, Passover. And we get there, and my father opens the door, and Zach is like, wrapped around my leg, and I said, Zach, this is your Zadie, which is that what we called him. And he, as soon as we walked in, he saw his Uncle Sandy and ran to his arms, and my dad looked at me, and I said, this is natural. Zach will gravitate to who has been in his life and who he knows and who wants him. And that was the bottom line.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what? No matter what your dad said, that hit him in the heart, because that's, I'm sure it did.
Look, there was
But
frictions
sure
with
lost.
his brother,
Yeah, I'm
because
sure
once
it
my
was.
father tried to get back in, my uncle wanted to, to this day tells me he tried to back off because he goes, I didn't want to create friction. Then my father would leave again, and then, and that was the whole thing. And it was very sad. And for me, my heart will be slightly broken for the rest of my life because I'll never understand.
That's like my mom.
But the same thing, a foundation, as much as we have our shtick, he knows I love him. He knows I wanted him. I was never supposed to have kids. That's why I made the choice. And so for me, I wrote a letter to my father and my mom. At that time, they were divorced. My father had remarried. I'm not going to get into that one. And he wrote me the most horrible letter back. very similar to your father. How selfish in me, how are you going to raise him, what kind of identity he's going to have. My mom was in Israel. She called me and said, this is not how I raised you to do it, but you're my daughter. This is going to be my grandchild. I'm going to love you,
That's
and I'm
right.
going to love the child.
That's right.
And she was in the living room with me.
Yeah. And it's funny how it's
I
like,
know,
you know,
sorry, I know.
no, because it's very
It's,
like,
it's broad.
Yeah, it is. It
It's
is
deep.
And then when you have your own kid.
Yeah,
I
it's deep.
remember I was working at Tommy Hilfiger at the time, and Sheri's dad came to visit. And we already had Tori and Kira, and I think she was pregnant with Riley. So Tori's probably 4, Kira was 2, and she was pregnant with our youngest. And I come home, and she's all upset, and her dad's gone. And he was supposed to stay the whole weekend. I'm like, where'd he go? He just got here. And she's like, we're on the playground, and somehow we started talking. You know, she thought he had gotten over it. He had accepted that he loved him. He played with him. She thought he accepted everything, and somehow they got into the conversation, and he says something to her like, well, you lied to me or betrayed my trust. And she's like, what are you talking about? He's like, you went against my will. You married Derrick, and you had children. And she's like, and that made her go, because at this point, it was like 4 years later, we're married, have kids, another one away. She's kind of like, are we still going back there? And he had a blowout. She's like, you gotta go.
Yeah.
You gotta go.
It's back to feeling punished.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, I'm sorry, and I tried to actually cut him. I didn't speak to him for a couple of years, but at the end of the day, that was worse on my soul than having him in my life in some capacity. And now we have, you know, it's superficial, but it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it, you know, but at the end of the day, I know that it's Derrick and me against the world.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids know that I would do anything for them. I would put down my life for them, willingly, like that. And that's all a kid wants to know. That's all a kid wants to know, is that they are so loved, so honored, so cherished, that they come first, that you believe in them, and you are so incredibly grateful that they are your child.
They do get embarrassed that we still snuggle and kiss like
And so, but
would
when
we
it
stop
comes,
that?
but you know, so as adult children that we are, when we do talk about our parents and how our parents failed us,
Right.
that's why the emotions come
Of
up.
course,
you know,
because we are still. I mean, both my parents are gone now, but I agree with you. It's the fact that you're like, wait a minute, I thought you loved me unconditionally. I thought I could do this. Now, again, I knew I was only allowed to. I never dated anyone outside my race or religion. Jay was the first one. I think that was one of the things he loved about me. Oh my God, she's so friggin' naive. You know? But so it just changed my world. Again, I know I'm a better person now because I have more empathy, sympathy, compassion towards others' plights. Not even just black people, other people that are in situations where I'll say they're the target for no warranted reason.
Right.
So we become more compassionate and understanding. But it still hurts when it comes from your own family.
Yeah.
of course, and that's why it goes back to, you know, this whole theme of your podcast is the interracial.
Yes.
The interracial uniqueness.
Yes,
of
or couples,
of these
yes.
relationships.
Yes.
You know. And I think the common denominator, you have to have, I don't want to say a thick skin, but you have to have such a conviction in your heart that you're being true to yourself, you're doing the right thing for you, and you have to walk that line, and you have to walk it proudly, and you have to, you know, I don't want to say defend it, because I really feel like, you know, you teach by example. You know, like I don't get on like my thing, like I've never actually talked about it like this, where, you know, it's like I'm for interracial, interracial relationships, blah blah blah. But just like with our kids, we teach the best when we teach by example. We teach how to be good parents, how to be good partners, how we treat our parents, you know, even though we might not see eye to eye. And how we conduct ourselves in life. And I think that is the greatest teaching that you can teach a child that is from an interracial couple.
But I have to say, I do get why parents are resistant to it, because they want you to have the smoothest life you can. And it's not just black and white. Anytime you're married out of religion or married, it's gonna be difficult. Even just like what Sheri was talking about, like 2 summers ago now, with the whole the whole Black Matters thing came to a head, and everybody was protesting during the pandemic, and the whole neonat. Like, Sheri was there with me and the kids, but like she said, she couldn't. She felt like, I don't know how to explain it, but she felt like kind of guilty that we were going through that and that we got it, but she couldn't share in a way of like saying, I get what you guys are going through. I can see it, but I get it.
But you understand, look, I understand it because I have a black son.
Right.
My best friends, his godparents are black. So I'm like, I love these people with
Right.
all my heart and
Right.
soul. So how can you feel this way about these people? Sometimes you want to scream at the top of your lungs, like, what is your problem and your stereotype or your issue of hate?
Right.
But
the best thing I feel like we can all do in situations where it's not quote unquote the social norm or whatever is just live our lives in a way that we show the world, the family, whatever, that it's beautiful, it works, and it creates amazing people,
right, who even have more compassion. That's a whole other of how they've been treated or this and that. So I think, because my last thing was going to say, what was your best advice you could give young couples? And I think you pretty much are saying it.
I think the best advice, I think it's so, and another reason I think it's really hard, because any new relationship, that you have with someone that you meet and you think you're going to fall in love with and build a future, a lot of times it doesn't work out.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're with the same religion and the same race, there are those arms again to like take you in. And when it's from a different race, it's kind of like you have to be so strong within your relationship that you can't depend on those people in your family to be like, it's all right.
That actually made us stronger, just being us.
That's right. So you against the world.
That's right.
A lot of people don't. They don't. And the world gets them. The pressure gets them.
That's why whether you're going into an interracial relationship or changing careers or doing anything, everything takes work. So do what you love. Love who you love, because it's never going to be easy. There's always going to be hurdles. Right. Two white Jews can get married and have drug addiction, alcohol addiction.
But my point is, they have the community of the synagogue to go to. They have the rabbi to talk to. They have the. That's what I mean.
Although my grandfather's rabbi said, "Don't support this."
Why? Because it was interracial.
Right. And therefore it split up the family.
Exactly.
So sometimes,
but I'm saying it's easier when you're that same religion, because if your grandfather would have gone, it's more controlling. If your grandfather would have gone to his rabbi and said, "My Jewish son-in-law and granddaughter
he'd
have
say,
problems,"
do whatever it takes to keep them together.
Exactly.
We need Jewish babies.
Exactly.
Yes.
So that's
to replace those lost in the Holocaust.
So that takes me back to, that's why you have to be, I think, so strong as a person and so strong as a couple, because you're not going to have that support.
Right, but also back to identity, because again, when you talked about the Jew, like my dad said the same thing. Now in Jewish religion, if the mother's Jewish, the child's Jewish. So, and I'll say I am for that. Like, and the fact that
my mother-in-law tells me that all the time. I'm like, well, what if they don't choose? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, exactly. when you go to God, you're going to be exactly.
She's like, I'm like,
but see, for me, part of it is when my ex chose not to be in his life because I didn't want to marry him. Mm-hmm. My thing is, okay, well then I'm carte blanche.
Right.
I get to raise him the way I want, and I always tell him you can blame me for everything. But so for me, because I could have easily walked away too, because my father, I was so upset about the whole Jewish thing. I could say, screw you. And I've had issues with Jewish people who have turned my back on me. Friends that I went to school with.
See, there's not one Jewish way, one size fits all. It's like whatever path you feel is right for you, take it,
But for me, it's more out of pride and my history. And I love the holidays. I mean, I would go with my I'll say mother-in-law, when I lived with her, to church. Yeah. And I'd sit with her crying. Yeah. Not because I became woke and believed in Jesus the way, Christians do. Because I missed going to my holidays and hearing the rabbi speak and the songs and the holidays. I miss that. I still to this day, we would go to temple. Sometimes I'd sit and cry the whole time because my mom was the pillar of our home with the holidays and family and catering and blah, blah, blah. And I miss that. And that's what I try to embrace. Look, the last thing I did for Passover was before he went away to college. I invited friends And I invited a couple of my Jewish friends. They had places to go, and I invited my group of black friends. It was Zach and I, my black friends. We had the best time. We talked about it. One of my girlfriend's boyfriend knew so much more about Passover because his father was a minister and would go every year to Israel. And it was one of the best times and holiday gatherings that I've ever had.
We celebrate all the holidays.
Yeah.
All the holidays. It was funny, just this past Christmas, Hanukkah, we were doing the Hanukkah candles. We do them every year, and the kids sing the song and everything. And my son's girlfriend, the one I was talking about, she was sitting there, and I watched her watch them do it, and I'm like, what's wrong? She's like, she's like, I've never been a part of this, and I never thought I'd be dating someone who would actually be lighting candles and doing this.
Right.
And I laughed because I remember that feeling like when we started doing it as a family, and Sheri started doing it with like Tori, and then the other one, I was just like, I've seen this, but wow, like I'm a part of this now, and I think if you asked our kids, they feel like they got the best of both worlds. They had Christmas, they had Hanukkah, they had Passover, they had Easter. They're like, ooh, we got more holidays, like. So
and those two great cultures. That's why I said my script, best of both worlds.
Best of both worlds.
Hands down.
I think, to be honest with you, much as people thought that it would be a problem having kids from a mixed race and mixed culture, I think my kids take that as their strength. And actually, my middle daughter said that there's so many biracial kids now that she doesn't feel special. She actually said that she's like, you look around now, because she felt when she was growing up, even in Manhattan, it was different. It was like, oh, you're not Hispanic, you're not black, you're not this, you're not, oh, you're biracial. She's like, now there's just so many. She's like, everybody's biracial, but she will tell you, they'll tell you, I think they feel like, because of the both cultures and the way we raised them, they felt like they got, like your book, the best of both worlds.
Yeah. And they'll find their way.
They're finding their way.
They're finding their way. They're figuring it out. Yeah.
I was joking with my daughter Tori. I said, you're 27 now. Did you decide, just messing with her. You decided you're Baptist or you are Jewish? You know what she said? Whatever suits me when I walk into the room.
Oh, God. You want to know something?
I thought that was hilarious.
I had a friend that once said to me with Zachary, when he needs to be black, he'll be black. When he needs to be a Jew, he'll be a Jew. I was laughing. That was Mort. He's not around anymore.
It's true. They have that. Yes, you're going to have people who are going to be racist, because they're this or because of that. You're going to have people who look at, Zach and our kids who are black and very militant, and you're half white. Ugh. Yeah. You're going to have people who are white who are very racist and like, you're half black. Ugh. So I don't think it has anything to do with just racism in general.
Right.
So.
Well, I just hope that in time the division will
My son
be
always
less.
says, how long?
Well, I never thought I'd have that. Zach was the one that told me about doing the podcast, and there's other things I'm going to be getting into as well, but how sad I never thought forget my age, his age, that we'd be having these conversations. Like you said, there are more biracial kids, but why is there still a problem?
Right.
Or if there's an issue with the divisiveness with being black, then if you're biracial, then you're just black.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Well, that is, the entertainment, like our kids are in the entertainment business, and Kira especially, she's on TV shows and stuff, and it is what you look at. What you look like.
Yes.
My dad says it all the time.
It's whatever you look like is what you are.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's whatever people look at you, and that's what you are.
Right. I know when he would walk out of my house, they wouldn't look at what a nice Jewish boy, or they'd like, this is a black man walking out, and now I get to stop him or do whatever.
Right.
And then I get the phone call, and then I would go crazy.
Well, in middle school, they told Tori that she was.
This was
horrible.
This was grade school. Grade school.
What did they tell her?
It was her. The kids for some reason, at playtime or lunchtime, were dividing into race: black kids, white kids. And the black kids told my daughter Tori, "Oh, you can come over here. You're Puerto Rican." And
so
she was like, "I'm not Puerto Rican," because this was grade school.
We're
and
like,
no. I'm like, you got a lot of stuff in your child, but Hispanic is not one of the things.
Look like them,
I wish,
that I had to have been Puerto Rican.
Yeah, and she was like,
you're
not. Like, and I literally said, you have a lot of stuff in you, but being Hispanic is not one of the things.
Yeah, that's Zachary. I know middle school said the kids would say, "Well, what are you? Like, you have to be one or the other."
Yeah. What?
And like, what does that mean?
What does that mean? And it's just like. Yeah, it's just stupid things. If you speak proper, then you're considered to be, quote unquote, acting white. If you speak this way, you're doing it. It's all stupid. But you know what? people
all
hold
judging,
on
it's
to
all
those things.
subjective. It's all, everyone has to put people in a certain classification that makes sense to them.
Right.
You know? And you know what, like I tell my kids, you can't make sense to anyone but yourselves. You can't make anyone else happy but yourselves. You can't do what's right for anyone else but yourselves, because then you're gonna be chasing your tail for the rest of your life.
Right,
Yeah.
and then you won't
You know?
be, and I always say, you always have to be true to yourself in order to be true to the ones that you love. And that's the only way you can be, or what's the point?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
It's
you
not
know,
easy, and especially in this day and age with internet and.
It's not easy, but it is easier if you do it, if you are authentic and walk in that truth, you know? Because then you don't have to, oh, how do I have to be for them, and how do I have to be for them, and how do I have to talk for them, and, you know? So you just do you,
Mhm.
and whoever doesn't get on your page, you keep
moving.
keep it
Yeah.
going, and let them do their thing. And sometimes they'll want to drag you along, saying, no, you got to do it my way, but you just gotta.
That's why I find as I get older, my friends are becoming more of a small little,
Yeah,
which is
cutting the
fine,
fat.
which is fine.
Every
Yeah.
year I
Yeah.
cut the fat.
Our friends now are our family, believe it or not. Our children and our parents, I mean, between our siblings and our parents who are getting older, our children who are in their 20s, we don't have time for friends.
Yeah.
We really don't. It's like, you know, and it's not a thing of like, we've done that. We have plenty of friends in Manhattan. We have plenty of friends in college. But as of right now, we were just talking about this, like, we don't have friends that we go out to dinner with or take
I
vacations
had a
with. 'cause
friend
we don't-
back in New York
Yeah,
that
but-
I loved hanging out with like once a month.
But like, maybe one. And once a month you went to lunch. It's literally no, but then you got a new friend. that can-
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God,
But
yes. But I agree. I mean, actually, but some of my friends have become my family. See, you guys are blessed. You have each other as a couple.
Mhm.
Me being on my own,
course.
I have I call it my village.
Yeah.
Of course.
And like my
Takes a
son's
village.
godparents, I'm not going to get in how we met, but God wanted us to be a family. I mean, literally. And I'll
Yeah.
tell you off camera how we met. Yeah. Anyway, I think Zach's like we have to wrap it up because I told him we could go on forever.
I knew that was
But
gonna
thank you.
Yes.
This
Thanks
is
for
another
coming.
great
Yes.
episode.
Zach.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I have to tell you, like, at the end of the day,
Zach,
one
you
thing
can
I have to say, at the end
Okay.
of the day, I cannot imagine a woman of any race or any background being more perfect to share my life with than her. So,
I got
no-
you, because it's as fruity as it sounds. I do not see color. I also don't see age.
Right.
You know, and I don't give a shit about that, but I do recognize that it is a thing.
yeah,
Of
it's
course,
out there
yes.
though, it's not in here.
Right. Well, what's in here is literally love.
Yeah.
What's out there is people
Yeah.
putting people in little. This is who you are, whether you like it or
Sure.
not. Yeah. Anyway. Well, thank you.